Hey guys, welcome back. So for this one, we're getting caught up with the Venom series by covering issues 33 and 34. So after this, we'll be current with Venom, while just putting another drop in the bucket for the Blood Hunt event. So with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so coming back, we pick up with a couple of vampire pilots who've both been instructed to drop off a special package in New York. And for a moment here, there's a bit of a debate between the two of them, because the first pilot's like, hey, this creature we're about to drop, it makes us look like vegetarians. And he even points out when Dracula first found this thing, he kept it on ice, he kept it captive, because once this thing gets started, it doesn't know when to stop. And if they let it out, eventually it's gonna feed on the whole world. So the co-pilot, who's at least 200 years older, he tells the first pilot like, hey, I've lived this long because I followed the sire's orders. And once this thing's out, it's gonna start by feeding on its natural prey. So there's that. But also he's like, hey, do you really want to tell our master we chickened out? And the next thing you see is them dropping this thing, as they quote Oppenheimer, because now they believe their decision has made them the destroyer of worlds. And after this coffin device lands on this rooftop, it opens up and out comes Threcker, who's also known as the Captive, amongst other names. And one of the first things he notices when he gets out is the scent of a symbiote. But next, when we head over to Venom, keep in mind leading up to this, the Venom symbiote thought that he failed to save Dylan, back when he was holding Dylan together after the attack from Carnage. And as it stands, Venom still doesn't know that Dylan traveled to the Unbeyond. He met the eventuality, he got to ask his 5 questions, and since then he's come back. But as far as the Venom symbiote's concerned, it's done everything it could to keep the body intact. It's restored Dylan's body physically, but as it stands, it still has no idea that Dylan's consciousness has returned. So now the symbiote's just gone out on his own, and there's a lot of stuff going through his mind, which first and foremost starts with mourning Dylan, but secondly with the sky blacked out, this reminds Venom of when Knull was here last, and it has him thinking if this is King in Black all over again. Except this time around, much like how Knull was coming for Eddie, Eddie would be coming for the Venom symbiote because he failed to protect Dylan. And it just has the symbiote like, well, how could I face Eddie after failing the one task he had given him? And now with the symbiote not having a host, this has him thinking about when was the last time it was like this. And the first person that comes to mind is Lee Price. Peter helped the Venom symbiote shed Lee's influence back in Venom Volume 3 Issue 6. Because Peter was like, hey man, bond with me, it'll be just like old times. But as soon as the symbiote got close enough, Peter told the officers to open fire with their sonic rifles, which then led to the very brief capture of the Venom symbiote. But looking back on moments like this now, it just has the symbiote thinking about how things like this have changed the circumstances to the point where Venom abhors the idea of bonding with Peter as much as Peter hates the idea of bonding with him, which for the Venom symbiote, that's him coming a long way. And the Venom symbiote goes on to think about Lee Price and how when he was bonded to the Mania symbiote, it was ripped off of him by Carnage, who at the time was pretending to be Eddie, and the shock of that separation proved to be fatal, to where later on Venom and Eddie took Mania back around the time of your absolute Carnage heading into King in Black, though at this time Mania's mind had already been eaten by Carnage. But this all leads to the idea now, where since the Venom symbiote doesn't have a host, it's not going to last much longer without the chemicals that a host provides. And it has him thinking things like perhaps he should pay Lee a visit, perhaps he should apologize, or make things right, because this could be it for the symbiote. But following this, we head over to Bren and Dylan, where right now Bren is helping Dylan out as far as getting situated and having a place to stay. And I mean, this spot that they picked out, it isn't exactly the coziest. So Bren asks Dylan like, hey, did you ask Normie if he had a place you could stay? And Dylan's just like, no way, especially not after beating the crap out of Norman Osborn, in addition to his mom being the head of Alchemax, who just might dissect Dylan even though he doesn't have the Venom symbiote, because he still has symbiote blood. So yeah, the way he sees it, he's better off taking his chances out here. But even still, Dylan can't help but to feel powerless, even with just needing to ask Bren for help. So Bren just does what he can, but it's not like he can get his dad involved, because after the whole no-name situation, his dad would look even deeper into it and he would find out a lot more. And not just about Dylan, but Bren's secret as well. And for Dylan, that's something he doesn't have to deal with anymore on any level, since he's no longer with the Venom symbiote. So Bren starts to tell him like, hey, you know, the Venom symbiote's out there somewhere. But Dylan stops him right in mid-sentence, and he tells him, look, I don't know if that's you or Toxin talking, but me and Venom are done. And he even tells Bren like, I don't know if toxins told you everything, cause Venom didn't tell me squat. Cause like we saw for Dylan, he learned about the sins from Venom's past by way of Carnage dragging him through those memories. And to take that a step further, when Dylan traveled to the Unbeyond and met the eventuality, he learned even more as far as what Venom's going to do, which again just has Dylan at the point where he wants nothing to do with Venom. So given the fact that Dylan can't feel Venom's mind right now, he just sees that as a plus. So for a moment, Bren's just like, man, like even with everything that's going on right now, and Dylan's more or less like, yeah, well, we had the nightfall and not get up again. That's happened before. And so Bren is just like, well, yeah, well, at least it ain't Knull this time. And I mean, it's not, is it? But Dylan's just like, nah, if Knull could come back, it would be something huge, something global, something just like last time. Which immediately this has Bren rushing to go check on his dad, while asking Dylan like, hey, you're okay here, right? And Dylan's like, sure, I mean, if it's not Knull. But just behind him, we see some glowing eyes and some teeth lurking in the shadows, looking like that creature from the Neverending Story. But following this, we leave Dylan for a moment and we head back over to the Venom symbiote, who's now made his way over to the grave of Lee Price. But not long after coming here, the Venom symbiote feels a stab of pain coming from something connected to him, and he feels this connection coming from around the grave of Lee Price. But when he heads over there to check it out, the grave is empty, to where soon after he's met by the Symbiote of Lee Price that's just coming towards him and mumbling pieces of words that almost sound like he's saying my symbiote. But right here, Venom's still trying to figure out what he's looking at, because Lee Price is gone, and even the codex that was left in him, it was ripped out. So he's not exactly sure what this is. But as soon as Lee reaches out and makes contact, Venom feels weak and helpless, much like he did when they were bonded together. So next, Venom asks this thing like, what are you? And it pieces together the word remnant, which then has Venom piecing this together like, okay, the rotted blood mixed with discarded symbiote cells, we got ourselves a zombie symbiote here. So Venom takes a piece of the tombstone and he just smacks him with it. But this still doesn't answer the question of who exactly set this in motion. But we get that answer rather quickly when a shadowy figure approaches, telling Venom that he set Lee Price in motion to lure him out here, which is an old trick that his kind has used to lure out and feed on symbiotes by attacking their weak spot, their hosts. And it isn't long before this person reveals themselves to be Threcker, the captive, who we saw earlier get dropped out of the plane and unleashed on the city. But really quickly, he's a member of a species called epsilon, who for a long time have nearly gone extinct, but these things will feed on the life force of any organic being, which also causes them to grow in power. And at one point, the captive had attained so much power that they tried to throw him into a sun to get rid of him as it was going nova, and he still survived. But right now, both the captive and Venom are in a weakened state, so Venom's not exactly sure how this is gonna play out. Meanwhile, when we go back to Dylan, he's going back and forth with himself, because he feels like he should be able to do something, because he's Codex, and he has the Necro Sword in him, and he's half symbiote, so it doesn't make sense to him why he should need another symbiote to summon the sword on his own. But all of a sudden, in the middle of Dylan talking to himself, he hears a voice come out from the shadows, talking about we all need someone. And as he steps into the light, we're shown that this priest took Venom's confession a long time ago, and he's been here just listening to Dylan go on and on about so much. And as someone who was also done wrong by Venom, he knows firsthand some of the sins of the past that Venom had committed. But he can also tell that Dylan didn't just hear these things, but he'd also experienced them. And because Dylan doesn't necessarily recognize him, he just ends up telling Dylan the story about his encounter with Venom, which wasn't a good one. And it's pretty crazy the way this is done, because it ends up being a callback to Venom issue 150, which is where this priest initially met Eddie. And at the time, he didn't know that Eddie was Venom, but he knew Eddie was a dangerous person. And in their conversation, Eddie mentioned that he'd gotten back into a relationship, one that he'd been dreaming about for years. So still, the priest didn't think much of it. And Eddie really didn't go into detail or say it was a symbiote, so the priest didn't pry into it. But since it sounded like this relationship was causing Eddie to do things that he didn't want to do, the priest told him this sounds more like an obsession. And when that's used to justify pain, it turns into something ugly. But all in all, in this talk, the priest never told Eddie to leave this person. He was just like, hey, whenever you're ready to talk, I'm here. And as it turned out, the Venom symbiote didn't like anything the priest was saying, because it believed at some point the priest was going to tell Eddie to leave the symbiote. And later on, after a fight with Scorpion, Eddie blacked out, only to wake up in that same church, covered in blood, with the priest laid out in front of him, barely hanging on for life. And after this, Venom did go to the hospital and visit the priest to give him a confession and offer his protection. But things didn't quite play out that way, because after the priest made his way out of the hospital with 3 broken ribs, a fractured hip, and a neural condition, he ended up getting cornered by vampires. And it quickly turned into a situation of being at the wrong place at the wrong time, because he wasn't on holy ground, he wasn't wearing his cross, he didn't have a slice of garlic pepperoni pizza, or even a bottle of water to bless in his defense. And as far as the protection from Venom, that just never came. So now he believes he has a new ministry, a new calling, a new vocation. When he tells Dylan, like, even though it seems that he's been abandoned, there's a new society that's rising that welcomes him in with open arms. So at first, Dylan tries to fight this guy off, but it really doesn't get him anywhere, which leads to the priest biting Dylan on the neck, which now causes him to realize that Dylan is half symbiote, which for a vampire, drinking Dylan's blood is like taking a swig of motor oil. It has an aftertaste, or so I've heard. So next, Dylan breaks a chair upside this guy's head, and he uses one of the legs to stake him through the heart. So now this puts Dylan in the clear for the time being. But when we go back to Venom, his situation is looking a bit questionable. Because again, in Venom's weakened state, he's going up against someone who survived ground zero of a supernova. Though at the same time, it's not like the captive is insanely powerful to the point that he's literally unstoppable, because he needs to feed. And we also find out the reason he was set free by the vampires is because they saw the symbiotes as competition. And though an argument could be made that Threcker could be seen the same way, even still he's just one person. And as we're told, the vampires see him as a galactic brother, while on the other hand the symbiotes are parasites and competition. So the captive was set free to get the symbiotes out of the way. So at first, with him luring out Venom, it starts off as what seems to be an easy kill. But when Lee Price resists his influence to protect Venom, this turns the tides here, because next, Venom ends up bonding with the Lee Price Symbiote. And during this time, there's also this brief moment where we see Venom feeling sorry for Lee Price and what he had been through. So to see him protect Venom for a moment here, this causes him to believe like, hey, maybe there is still a part of Lee in there somewhere. And it's shown to us in a way in the story where it goes back and forth between Dylan and Venom, since on both ends it builds up to a moment where they're about to get bitten. But on Venom's side, this takes a crazy twist, because after bonding with Lee, this didn't make him strong enough to take on the captive, but instead, much like how the priest found Dylan's blood to be tainted and something he couldn't consume, the captive also ran into quite the surprise here, because when he tries to feed on this Venom Lee Price Symbiote amalgamation, it turns into a feedback loop that causes Threcker to feed on himself. And it's pretty wild, because for a moment here, Venom's like, oh, okay, so this is how my ancestors survived you, or survived your kind, I should say, by more or less using the Epsiloni's traps against them. And it kind of has me thinking, like, could this be something where later on, Venom travels through time, and he saves his ancestors with this information? Who knows? But speaking of time travel, after Venom's done with Threcker, Meridius shows up, and he offers Lee the opportunity to leave the dying Venom symbiote to bond with him, since his collection of symbiote material is much fresher. And it makes for this moment that's almost like poetic justice, since the Venom symbiote has left Lee before, and now Lee is leaving him. And after taking Lee, Meridius reveals to Venom that he was the head of the absent throne, and how he wanted Venom to eventually reach Venom world status, though as it would seem, it's not gonna come to that. And it just has Venom like, man, Dylan's gone, and from the looks of it, Venom's gonna die here. So it seems like Meridius has won, and Meridius doesn't disagree. So as he walks away, he tells Venom that he's taking Lee Price as a plan B / consolation prize, because Lee might not give him Venom World, but he will be able to give him something close. And as Meridius leaves, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, Dylan's alive. Your Eddie's coming back. And when that happens, the war begins. So yeah, following all this blood hunt madness, Venom issue 35 is going to give us the prelude to Venom War. And I'm ready to see how this is going to play out exactly. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.